There it was. Ink. Black as ink. Pages for days. Of all the bookshelves in all the world, it had to be sitting on mine.
Stormfront by Jim Butcher is the first instalment in his Dresden Files series. It follows Harry Dresden, a wizard who barely makes ends meet, by offering his unique services to solve magic-based crimes in Chicago. It reads very much like an homage to film noir, with its first-person narration and specific flavour of description, but with a hint of Jessica Jones sprinkled throughout. Stormfront sees Harry Dresden take on two cases at once. The first, a missing husband, the second, a gruesome double murder performed using black magic. As he gets closer to the truth, the more at risk he finds himself and the people around him. As well as being a crime thriller, novel noir, it is also a hidden world fantasy, though it's set in modern day Chicago, I think. It does also contain magical creatures and beings like fairies, vampires and wizards, though most people don't believe in the supernatural. Incidents relating to this magical world are becoming more common and difficult to hide. This is a really fun read. Although it can be a little gruesome at times, it's light-hearted enough that you don't come away from it feeling depressed, but there was enough by way of the darker elements and themes to give it a little bit of bite. The plot is pretty good, with lots of twists and red herrings and suspects to keep you guessing, even though I totally guessed who done it, like, near the beginning. The world building is very solid. It's not described with a huge amount of depth, which is fine because it's not really the book for that. But what is mentioned, with all the little extra details, does feel real and almost possible. I also really enjoyed Harry as the main character. He's obviously competent and good enough to be enjoyable to follow, but he's not perfect. He has issues and weaknesses and still gets his butt handed to him on occasion, which does build real tension, especially at the end. We're not concerned that he's going to die, after all there are other Harry Dresden books, but you're concerned that he won't be able to save everyone else. I also liked how parts of his backstory were gradually revealed to the reader without taking us out of the action for several chapters of flashback. He breadcrumbs, dropping tiny nuggets of information so that when he explains it in more depth later, it all comes together and makes sense. And I think it works with his character, which is a problem I've often had with backstories. They don't inform the character, but in this case I think it does. Also, there is a cat called Mr. and he's excellent and very much alive at the end, which is always a plus in my book. I don't think the prose is as strong as it could have been. Definitely needed a little bit of tightening up and fine-tuning in places. There was an issue with repetition, with the same word being used several times in the same passage, for instance, which always just sounds a bit off. A bit like a Shyamalan script. Even when it was done intentionally for effect, it didn't really work. And on a broader scale, there were bits of information and description that were needlessly repeated, which annoyed me. The characters felt a little 2D or caricaturish at times. Not all the time, thank goodness, but I wasn't totally convinced by all of them. The villain was especially cartoonish, but I won't dwell on that. Harry also says several times that he's not good with women and can't talk to them, has no experience, but he keeps coming out with these lines that I think are pretty suave, so it sort of felt like Butcher wanted to distance Harry from the playboy stereotype, but at the same time didn't really want to make him actually bad with girls. So all the ways in which he's apparently rubbish at relationships is more due to outside forces. Like he goes on a date, but oh no, a demon has been sent to murder him. Oh, he's just so bad with women, with demons fighting him. The women are also all really attractive for some reason, in different ways, of course, not all like the same woman, which would be a plot twist. But there's this weird focus on like their makeup and their clothes. Actually, there's a lot of focus on what characters are wearing, which was odd at times. But Harry does seem to focus on like how women look, especially feminine perhaps, when they smile, which is just a bit odd. Also might have been a side effect of the whole film noir vibe. There's also a tendency to make the nasty characters who don't like Harry unattractive. There are obviously attractive people who don't like Harry, but that's generally out of like fear or something understandable, and usually they're women, whereas the male characters who don't like Harry are always described as not particularly attractive, which I thought was very curious. And in general, it does lean too much into the film noir genre, to the point where it sort of reminded me of this.
He was playing me like he'd play a fish. I can't make it much clearer than that.
All in all, this is a pretty fun read. I would recommend it to people who like their fantasy or crime drama with a little less grit, or perhaps those interested in an homage to film noir and murder investigations. This probably isn't for those who are into more serious literature, or who want something very dark, because it isn't. At least, I didn't think it was, but that might have been because I was imagining Colin Mochrie and Ryan Stiles narrating it. Will I read the rest of the books in the series? Yeah, I think I probably would, if I happened across them. I think my local library actually has a copy of the second one in the series in, so I'll probably check that out and give it a go. That's all my thoughts on this one, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.